about him. The realization that he was in there taking pictures of himself and other people beside me. Thank God he had already been caught, because I wouldn't have gone on the news the next day. I would have run for it.
Wouldn't it be nice if we were older, then we wouldn't have to wait so long? And wouldn't it be nice to live together in the kind of world where we belong? No one's gonna make it that much better when we can say goodnight and stay together. Wouldn't it be nice if we could wake up in the morning when the day is new, after having spent the day together, hold each other close the whole night through? What happy times together we could be spending. I wish that every kiss was never ending. Oh, wouldn't it be nice? Maybe if we think and wish and hope and pray it might come true. Run, baby, then there wouldn't be a single thing we couldn't do. Or we could be married, and then we'd be happy, and then we'd be happy. Oh, wouldn't it be nice? You know, it seems the more we talk about it, it only makes it worse to live without it. But let's talk about it. But wouldn't it be
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching. Joe and I are very excited to do this episode of Crime Talk. Joe, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I wasn't prepared for that, for our introduction. It was funny in a way. I mean, it shows the incongruence of what was going on probably in Dennis Rader's head.
I know. I thought it was very creative and ironic. You know, so
I loved it. It is creative and ironic, and these are hard subjects, so sometimes it's good to have
sometimes you just have to play the Beach Boys, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I tried to, because it was graphic content, you know, like we just tried to make that a little easier to watch.
I think it actually does help, to tell you the truth. That's the first time I've actually seen all those images. But I just like to point out to the audience that some of those images were of Dennis Rader himself dressed as a woman, hanging in these positions. So
he got off on that.
Yeah, just make sure our viewers are aware that, you know, we're not totally sadistic.
No.
Yeah.
That's all Dennis.
Right. So there.
Yeah. So I just want to start by, just kind of, I guess not everyone is familiar with the case. So he was born March the 9th in 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas. So I guess between 1974 and 1991, I think he killed like 10 people. That was like in the Wichita and Park City area. And so, his spouse, Paula, she has since passed in 2005. So he has two kids, and that would be Carrie Rawson and Brian Rader. So Dennis is known as BTK or BTK killer. And, you know, unlike many serial killers that have been given names like, you know, Jack the Ripper by news media, Rader named himself BTK, bind, torture, kill, after the way he murdered his victims. So naming himself, I think, says a lot about, you know, his egotistical behavior, which we'll talk about. Mostly serial killers are egotistical and narcissistic, but this guy sets the bar, and it's pretty damn high. Wouldn't you agree, Joe? It's like,
Yeah, yeah. And just like the incongruence with the music at the beginning and the pictures we were looking at, there's a lot of incongruence in Dennis too. He doesn't seem to be at all what he presents. So
not at all. You know, to everyone, they saw him as for what he was in the community. I mean, he was a churchgoer, he was a family man, he was a scout leader. I mean, this guy, nobody would even think twice, you know. And I think, Joe, you found like even his own mom and brother were in denial about that. You showed me
yeah,
something you had found. I think it was on DuckDuckGo.
yeah. I mean, like what happens in these cases, and one of the reasons why Mrs. W and I Mrs. W and I are motivated to do this show is because, like, when you hear about serial killers, you don't hear much about family members, and they sometimes have, you know, what I would consider some of the most important information that might help. But everybody, because of the subject matter, you know, and because of harassment, people harass them and stuff. They hide instead of talk. But Rader had three younger brothers. His father was Marine. His mother, you know, stayed at home and raised the kids. You know, for all intensive purposes, on the surface anyway, everything was normal and ho hum. So when he was arrested all these years later, it came as a shock to his family members, all his family members, including his brother Jeff, and he had a couple of younger brothers who have not made any comment. But his brother Jeff said that he, you know, at first was completely shocked, but as he found out more of the details, he kind of became more accepting. And apparently, Dennis Rader's mother also could not believe that he would do this, and she apparently has never been accepting of it. Um, and
No.
and the same can be said. Now, I think his wife kind of jumped on board pretty quickly, but you know, his daughter,
Did.
yeah,
Paula was gone. She was done. She wanted nothing
yeah,
to do with him after that. Um, so he started killing when he was 28. He murdered, you know, like I said, he murdered 10 people on 7 different dates. So if you wonder why there's such a long time span and like only 10 people instead of much, much more, well, it's because according to Dennis, if he hadn't had like trophies that he had taken from the crime scenes, that indeed there would have been, you know, many more victims. So apparently, you know, he I guess satisfied himself with you know, all the little things that he took, you know. So he would basically use these to masturbate. So he was good after that.
yeah.
Um,
And that kind of behavior started, you know, really early in his childhood, which I'm sure we'll get to later.
oh, we will.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah,
Oh yeah. So you know, so he did that for years, and you saw from the pics and the intro. So he wasn't, you know, he wasn't killing, he was still a very busy guy. You know, he was stalking women, looking in windows, cross-dressing, jerking off to duct tape Barbies. I mean, you know, the usual. I'm just
yeah,
kidding. I'm just kidding. The usual for him.
yeah. And
Um,
all this without apparently anybody really knowing. Um,
yeah,
he hid
right.
it
And
well from his family, um, and he was an upstanding member of the society. You know, from all appearances, he was
yeah.
like a
Um,
dog catcher. He worked in security.
Yeah, Patriot Core said, never know when evil is right in front of you. And this is a case where that couldn't be more from the truth. I mean, it is so true when it comes to this guy.
Yes.
Um, Yeah, he's just a completely different person. So he had an ordinary upbringing that we know of. I still think there might have been something we don't know. So he was, like Joe, you said, he was the oldest of four sons. He really did a good job of masking disturbing behaviors that he had, like hanging stray animals. So he dropped out of college, and he joined it was the Air Force, and that was probably like mid 60s. And so in 1971, that's when he married Paula. And so he worked for an outdoor supply company for a year. In 1974, he worked for ADT Security Services. Interesting. So his forced murders were also in 1974, and he strangled to death four members of the Otero family in their home. It was the parents, Joseph and Julie, and then they had two kids, Josephine and Joseph Jr. So he went inside the home, and it was very sudden, so they didn't really have time to react. And this is how it didn't fail. Because he thought it would be just the wife and the kids. So it wouldn't have been that difficult, to overtake, a female and, like kids. He was not expecting the husband to be home. So this could have really gone wrong for him. And I mean, he did cut the phone lines, so he thought ahead and he planned it out, but it just wasn't enough. Joseph Otero, he had cracked ribs from, I guess he was in a car accident, and he probably wasn't his normal self. Like, he didn't have the strength that he probably normally would. And then their dog also caused some issues. He didn't say what, but I can imagine the dog was probably freaking out. So he did tell Mr. Otero to get rid of the dog, and so he had one of the kids put it out. And so he took all four of them to the bedroom, tied them up, and they were not comfortable. They were complaining of being tied up because these people don't know they're going to die. They have no clue. They think that he just wants to rob them. I mean, it's like the fact that he is going to make sure that they're comfortable. He's loosening the ropes. He's like, concerned about the guy because he was in, a car accident and he's got broken ribs. So he even told the judge that, I tried to make sure he was as comfortable as possible. And I'm thinking, I mean, that's just, it's like you're about to slaughter these people, but yet you're making them comfortable. I don't know. That was just really.
Yeah, he tried to lead them to believe that he was like an escaped criminal that was wanted, and all he wanted was their valuables and their automobile. So that's how it was easy for him to tie up all four members of the family.
Yeah.
And they assumed he was telling the truth, but of course he's a serial killer, so he wasn't telling the truth.
No. Let's go to the video clip of the courtroom. Let's go ahead and go there.
All right. Does anyone know of any legal reason why the court should not now pronounce sentence?
No.
All right. Well, I will state for the record the only available sentence in all of these cases is life. The only difference between these various sentences is that in regards to count 10, there is available to the court a sentence referred to commonly as a hard 40 sentence. But in regards to count 1, I would ask that you stand, Mr. Rader. It will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve a term of life for the premeditated murder of Joseph Otero. In regards to count 2, it'll be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve the term of life for the premeditated murder of Julie Otero. In regards to count 3, it will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve a term of life for the premeditated murder of Josephine Otero. In regards to count 4, it will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve a term of life for the premeditated murder of Joseph Otero, Jr. In regards to count 5, will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve the term of life for the death, premeditated murder of Catherine Bright. In regards to count 6, it will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve the term of life for the premeditated murder of Shirley Vian. In regards to count 7, it will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve the term of life for the premeditated murder of Nancy Fox. In regards to count 8, it will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve the term of life for the premeditated murder of Maureen Hedge. In regards to count 9, it will be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve the term of life for the premeditated murder of Vicki Wagerly. In regards to count 10, the state has properly filed with the court a request to impose the sentence pursuant to the hard 40 statute, as it is commonly referred to. That was done on the 27th of, that was done actually on or about the 3rd day of May 2005. There were 2 allegations of aggravating circumstances. Those being that the defendant committed the crime in order to avoid or prevent a lawful arrest of the prosecution. I find that the evidence in this case, and also pursuant to State v. Higginbottom, 264 Kansas 593, State v. Marsh, State v. Bailey, which is a case I prosecuted, and State v. Walker, also a case I prosecuted, that factor does in fact exist. There's an additional factor. That was the factor of this being especially heinous, cruel, atrocious, or cruel manner that the homicides were committed in, based upon the evidence which I did hear from the Deputy Captain Sam Houston in regards to the fact that the victim, Dolores Davis, in your opinion, knew what was going to happen to her, knew that you were going to kill her, and you took 2 to 3 minutes to suffocate her, that is a homicide committed in an especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel manner. It will therefore be the judgment, order, and sentence of the court that you, Dennis L. Rader, be taken by the Sheriff of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and by him delivered to the custody of the Secretary of Corrections to serve a term of life for which you will not be parole eligible until the expiration of 40 years. I will assess, yes.
The findings that you've made regarding the aggravating factors, I believe the law says that you must make a finding that those have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
I am going to do that.
Okay. And that they're not outweighed by mitigation.
I'm going to do that as well. I will pronounce that sentence, as I indicated, you will not be parole eligible for 40 years. I have found that those aggravating factors existed, and I will find that those aggravating factors, beyond a reasonable doubt, outweigh any mitigating factors and circumstances which exist. I have heard some statements in regards to mitigating factors, but no evidence has been produced. The statements I've heard in regards to mitigating factors are that you had cooperated with law enforcement and had not, in fact, taken the case through trial. I do not find that those outweigh the aggravating factors existing herein. I will assess the cost to the defendant. I will give the parties approximately 30 days to make determinations in regards to restitution and miscellaneous court costs Also, I will give the parties 30 days to argue relative to the recommendations of conditions of incarcerations. All the court can do under the statutes in existence at the time is to make recommendations. It's entirely up to the Secretary of Corrections what they will or will not do. All right. I would suggest that we obtain a date for hearing these particular matters. Please obtain that date from my aide. Is there anything further to put on the record at this time?
Your Honor, only as to the evidence will withdraw.
Well, the evidence at this juncture will be held and kept by the court.
Okay.
None of that evidence is of intrinsic value insofar as jewelry or money, nor is it of any danger such as a firearm. So I will, in fact, instruct the reporter to take the items of physical evidence into her custody.
Okay.
Anything further?
Not by the state.
None from the defense, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much. I would request that counsel join me in chambers shortly.
And he's never getting out. So, the courtroom before that, like his testimony, I don't know. Did you watch that, right, Joe?
Yes. Yeah, I did watch his testimony.
Okay, so I have never seen any testimony with the apology and it was almost like he was accepting an Academy Award. I mean, he was thanking the investigators for doing such a good job at apprehending him. He just went on. It was like the longest last statement I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of them. I've seen so many. And yeah, this is by far, it's just crazy. But, during my correspondence with him, and for those of you that know me, I do love true crime. I really enjoy it. And I decided to just take it to the next level and, going to talk to these people. I just want to see, I like to poke the fire, I just like to, I don't know. You know what I mean, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She she's like me. She's curious about what makes these guys tick. And, I'm really fascinated with what has happened to them and what caused them to do this. And
what you're seeing now is the correspondence that we've had. If you could just play that again. And the artwork that he sent me. I think you might have seen a picture, magazine clipping of a cardinal. Yeah. So apparently the cardinal made him think of me, and he decided to clip it out of a magazine and send it to me. I'm not sure how much you guys know of like somebody as prolific and as notorious as Dennis Rader. To get a response back from him, especially now that he's no longer talking to the media, he's no longer BTK according to him, and he actually told me that. So it's huge because he doesn't write people back. So if you get something back from him, then obviously something he was interested in. So, I remember when Mr. W came back from the mail and, he's bringing me the mail. He's like, close your eyes and hold out your hand. And oh my God, when he put the letter in my hand, I was just like, I had to sit down. Seriously, I did. Yeah, it was just crazy. I was just like too excited, and it was really thick. So he writes a lot. His writing, it's very, very hard to read. So it does take a while to go through it. But and he's very specific about, if he tells you the rules of the prison, he outlines everything. So, it's just, it's crazy. But it's like I was looking for some bit of humanity, and I actually, what seemed like he has a love for his daughter, and he talked about family. He gave me gardening tips. Um, it was just it was almost like talking to my grandpa. I mean, it was really weird. I had to keep reminding myself of who he was and what he did. But yeah, I got great gardening tips from him. I mean, he he's actually like a person aside from that. But it's something like just talking to somebody like this, knowing what they've done and who they are and how they can seem so real. It's just so, with that bit of humanity that you don't see on the news. It's mind blowing. But he does, he enjoys our correspondence. He does. This is another one of the things he signed to send to me. He seems very narcissistic, and like he made sure to send pictures of himself, especially in the jumpsuit. I think a lot of people in the crime world were very envious of this one. I guess it goes for a lot online, or like, there's like a murderbelia, so to speak. But yeah, so it's really interesting to be able to get some of that. And what he calls, if you could show, there's like a little emblem. This one too, it says Caveland, and that's actually, he told me that's what they call his cell, because he knows he's never getting out, and he kind of made it, you know, I guess he accepted the fact that he's never getting out, and so he calls it Caveland. It's like a coping, I guess, wouldn't you say, Joe? Like it's a way that he copes,
Yeah.
by being where
I
he is.
mean, when you're in jail, you have a lot of time, obviously, and you got to fill that time, and he tends to fill his time with some landscapes as well as pictures that he's cut out of magazines and things like that. But yeah, he draws these little cave-like drawings and landscapes. I know when I worked in the field, I worked with somebody that was an art therapist, but she was basically looking for clues of what's going on in someone's subconscious by what they draw. So you can do that. I mean, it's possible, and I learned some things to look for. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So,
tokens of friendship, and yeah. So yeah, thank you for showing those. So yeah. Oh, this is another one. I forgot about that. So yeah, it's another picture of him. That was when he was working for Park City in the animal control, which, according to his childhood, he probably did not need to be working in animal control. He doesn't need to be around animals at all. He hung cats for fun and got off on them. It's just so weird. But yeah, he seems so normal aside from, everything else. Yeah,
now
that's
this
always
is a
fun.
picture from him, Mrs. W.
Yeah, that is something he drew. It's called Voodoo Man. He seems to draw that a lot.
You remember when you first showed me that picture, what I said is that the person that drew that may have had something wrong with his brain.
Yeah.
Well, it
A
turned
truth,
out he did.
truth Junkie said, "What's up with the numbers 6 and 9 on the bottom right of that drawing?" I have no idea. I'm just like, I don't know. I have no idea what it is. Joe has actually told me more about some of the things I've gotten and explained it that I didn't know. Just because this is what Joe did for a living. Um, like this caveland right here. It's a little drawing. It's like his coat of arms. He said it was the coat of arms for caveland. So the C being cave and the L being land, and something, I'm not really sure what he explained it, but I'm not really sure. I didn't really understand what it was, other than established in 2005, which is when he was arrested or when he was incarcerated. So, yeah. And yeah, so that's, you know, and that's another Yeah, he calls it the sanctuary, aka the caveland, you know. Um, but yeah, so yeah, it is weird and creepy. It's very weird and creepy. Um, but yeah, so back to what we were talking about. So this the Otero family, he said they panicked on him. No shit, I would have panicked too. So he said he had to work quickly, and yet again, no one died yet. They just kept passing out because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's never murdered anyone before. So the whole family was passing out, not dying yet, because he said he didn't know how much pressure to put on them because he'd never killed anybody before. And when they died, he killed Joseph Jr. with a bag of bag and then t-shirts so he couldn't tear a hole in it. And Josephine was hung in the basement. When she woke back up, and he proceeded to masturbate to a 9-year-old girl hanging from the ceiling. Yeah. So semen was found around her, and it was like on her leg, and this is just absolutely sick. But yet, he prides himself because he never actually raped anyone. And he did tell me he bragged about it. He's like, I've never raped anyone, but yet he is considered a sexual predator. So, and he let me know that because apparently I can't send him pornographic material, which I never had intended to. But thanks, Dennis, for letting me know that. So,
So I guess if we want to get Dennis in trouble,
yeah, just send him some pornographic material. Yeah, I mean, yeah, gotta wonder. Who knows what I know he has a core group of people but he no longer talks to the media. He no longer, I really didn't expect to get anything back, honestly. But when I did, boy, I was feeling all sorts of ways. I was just so I was excited, but yet at the same time weirded out. And I was just like, oh my God. But yeah, I tell you, Nancy Grace would be so proud of me. Yeah, you could show the picture of me and Nancy Grace. She'd be really proud of me. But yeah, I felt like Nancy Grace. You know what I mean? It's like, every time I get a letter back from anybody that's really notorious, and even when Scott Peterson wrote me, I was like, I felt like Nancy Grace. Yeah. But
good for
okay.
you. Good for you.
Yeah. So yeah, there's just my next, just taking true crime to the next level. And yeah, I have a binder that's serial killer and mass murder correspondence. It's just and it's huge. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff in there. So these are really some disturbing pictures. That's the 9-year-old girl hanging from the pole in the basement.
Some of the semen all of the semen was found behind that little girl, which I think is important to note.
Yeah.
I think some may be on the back of her legs or something, but most of it was detected on the pole that you saw there. And that when he was masturbating, he was standing behind her as she was struggling.
Yeah, it's like he didn't want to look, or
didn't want to look her in the face, but wanted to watch the struggle, which to me, to me that says that subconsciously he had some guilt, which is more of a sociopath tendency, but this guy clearly had mainly psychopath traits, but he did have a mixture of both.
Yeah, and it's like he said that he did feel bad for the victims because they asked him in court, and he said he did feel bad for the victims.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to indicate that he was wrestling with a lot of guilt, just because of the way he killed his victims and stuff, and what he said, some of the things he said to you also.
Yeah, well, he sure didn't clean that semen up because the semen that was around the girl was clearly left, and I guess DNA then wasn't really like it is now, but he said that it's called the right hand rule, and he'll go from room to room as he's taking trophies and stuff. He's just going from room to room and kind of cleaning everything up. I don't know really what he was cleaning up, because I would think that you would clean that up.
He was an odd guy. Most of the serial killers of this sort have, really high intelligence, but I'm just not real sure about Dennis. He never did well in school. And with all of these murders, he seemed to make some mistakes that I know nowadays would definitely lead to him being arrested much sooner.
Yeah.
But just because
So,
of the time and day, or the technology available, he was able to get away with it.
yeah, he was really quick to like in writing me a letter. If he even thought that I had misspelled something, because sometimes my A's might look like a different letter or something, and he'll correct my letter and send it back to me. It's just like, what? Who does that? Um, but he did tell me that he sends me my letters back. He didn't send them all back, so I don't know about that. But he said that I guess, sends the letters back so they can't be found. I'm not really sure. Like, so they don't get into the wrong hands. That was his wording for that. But I mean, he's in pretty much like solitary. I mean, there's nobody in his cell with him, you know. So, and yes, he was married while committing the crimes. Truth junkie, yeah. So his wife had no clue. I mean, bless her heart, she was just, she was just the
Right.
good little wife. They go to church and kids,
Yeah.
and you know,
But she was the first one that seemed to accept it real quickly and get
she
out.
did,
You
which
know,
makes me wonder about their marriage. Like, um, I'm pretty sure he couldn't get it up all the time in the bedroom. So,
I
maybe,
don't think he could do the same at the crime scene either. Otherwise, he would be a rapist. I
yeah,
know I told you that earlier.
yes. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It's like, I think in his mind, I mean, he would have been raping everybody, but he's really quick to tell you that too. Like, he really prides, himself, and that he's never raped anybody. Which, jerking off to a 9-year-old kid, I mean, that's just as sick. I mean, it's just like, I mean, but he wants credit for everything. Like, for example, um, he would tell authorities if they got anything wrong. Oh no, I'm responsible for that. No, I killed that person. And he would taunt the public and the police. And it was just a cat and mouse, but he wasn't really good at the game because he ended up getting caught by a floppy disk, which we'll talk about. So the next murder, it happened in Sedgwick County. So this was just a mess as well, and of course, he had no idea that Kevin Bright would be with his sister Catherine, and he just had them tie each other up at gunpoint,
could I
Um,
could I jump? I'm sorry. There was a few details of that first after he murdered the family that I thought indicated that he was real frazzled.
oh yeah,
Um, he After he murdered that family, and keep in mind that he had to strangle and re-strangle these people, and he plays it off like, I couldn't kill him, and so I had to redo it. But a lot of the forensic psychologists think that he intentionally did that. He would let them come back to life and then choke them out again to increase their terror.
yeah,
So that was the issue. But for some reason,
it's,
after he murdered these people, he stole their car, their family station wagon, drove it to the local or the nearby market of some sort, and tossed the keys up on the roof. And he was seen doing that, but he still wasn't caught. But he ran just a few blocks away to jump in his car to leave the scene. So his car was nearby, but why would he steal the family's wagon? And just I guess maybe to throw off that he was a serial killer or something like that, maybe. But
yeah,
to me, that was just real bizarre. And the witness that saw him said that, he was acting really strange and he was shaking, and they could tell he was just frazzled. So he was freaked out after that first
mhm,
murder. And, to me, that also indicates that there's a guilt process involved too, because a lot of serial killers, don't get freaked out,
yeah, no.
and
Yeah, so, and the whole thing, this was really funny, but the cereal box that he he put like some of the things from the victims into a cereal box, because serial killer, like, and he threw it into the back of a pickup truck at a Home Depot. And it's like, how cheesy is that? I mean, I don't know. It's just, he was like leaving clues for police officers and stuff.
Yeah.
So
After
yeah.
he murdered the family, he had left a note at the public library in a book somewhere, and the police did happen to find it, but
Mhm.
it didn't
And
help.
yeah, Patriot Corps. Yes, I think he was relieved he was caught. I think he wanted to be caught. There, Joe and I, we had actually talked about that, and he, even though it seems like he was trying to, I think he wanted it to continue longer, but I think all in all, he wanted, subconsciously, he wanted to get caught.
I think he thought right after the first murder, and probably right before, that he was definitely going to get caught.
Yeah.
But he just had this intention to try to get away with as many before he got caught.
Mhm.
But I think subconsciously there's a lot of evidence that he was doing things so that he would get caught, which tells
Yeah.
me that, he had a guilty subconscious, which doesn't match up with a typical psychopath, as we know.
Right.
And the fact that he had some really close relationships through his life. It appears that his brothers loved him, and
Yeah.
his children did.
Yeah, well, he's a likable guy, and like I said, and even the letters, I mean, he's very helpful. He's like, "Oh, if you want a recipe for this, I'll get," he's just very likable, and you really do have to that side of him, because, like he says, he told me he's no longer BTK. He says that he's not in very good health, and that, he no longer, you know, he doesn't even go by BTK anymore right now. So, but is he just saying that, or?
See, that's the thing with Dennis, is probably everything he says is a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all intended to present this persona. It's like he's been trying to convince researchers and psychiatrists and psychologists since he was arrested that he had a really normal childhood. And I think it's because he gets off on this idea that he wants everybody to believe that serial killers are just born, and that we all should be worried because it could be anybody. Whereas, and that also gives him this big persona that he's a big, scary, abnormal monster of some sort. But the truth, the truth is that millions and millions of people with these types of personality disorders are not violent. They might sell you a car that's, not running as well as advertised, or they might, spread lies to get up the whatever perceived ladder that they're trying to get up, but
Yeah.
they don't kill people.
No.
But I think he's been trying to convince the world since he was arrested that he was just born this way, that his family was nice and perfect, his childhood was happy, that he was just born a killer, because that's much more frightening than, my childhood was screwed up. But it's obvious that there is an issue here with his brain. And I think, is it okay if I talk about that a little bit, Mrs. W?
Yeah, absolutely.
They found a brain defect with this guy because he's, he enjoys any kind of attention he can get, and, he craves it. So he's been, he's allowed some studies of his brain, and they found that he has a defect in his thalamus. It's a region of the brain that's considered to help control major emotions and stuff. The way it was kind of described is it's like the frontal cortex, or the orbital frontal cortex, sends messages to the thalamus, and then the thalamus's job is to like put a brake on somebody from worrying about certain things, or dwelling on certain things. But his thalamus isn't working properly, so that dwelling and that obsessing, it keeps on going. There's no natural braking system for these types of obsessive thoughts. So that's why, it seems that it could be true that this guy was just maybe born with this, and he ended up being a serial killer because of that. But and that's what I concluded after reading the first initial reports and conclusions. But as you dig into it deeper, I think that there's a lot more to the story. And I'm pretty sure it's not true in this case that he was born to kill. I think things happened. I think things happened in his environment and he became a killer. And I think it was probably a choice. It's not something that,
That sounds spot on. And Joe, do you mind telling the viewers that might not have heard before, like what you evaluated prisoners before they
yeah,
to the
I worked in the mental health field for over 20 years, over 25 years really. And I worked in a bunch of different capacities, but towards the last five years or so of my career, I evaluated all of the new clients or patients that came in to our center, and I also went to the jail or interviewed prisoners when the sheriff would bring them to me.
that is so interesting.
Yeah, and most of the prisoners I would evaluate, well, not most, but a lot of them were sex offenders. And most of them obviously have some mental health issues, but whether it was a chronic mental health problem that caused them to behave the way they do, I think. I mean, I didn't see a lot of cases where I thought that was true.
Yeah. If you look at some of the pictures, especially of Mr. Otero, like you could tell his face was really swollen. So I think with how he kept going, like I said, like we talked about, they didn't just die immediately. He kept, like, he'd almost killed him and then, kind of like make him relive it, because think about it. It's like, that's what excited him, is to see somebody struggle,
Yeah, that's what I read about. One of the reactions from one of the psychologists is when Dennis testified in court, and he made it sound like, he didn't, he wasn't prepared with how much force it took to strangle the woman and the man and this kind of stuff. But the coroner said that was an outrage because it was clear he tortured these people on purpose.
Yeah, because see, like right here, you can tell by the wounds and the amount of swelling. You just don't have that. If somebody just strangles somebody, they're not going to have all the swelling that these victims do. And you can clearly see, especially in Mr. Otero's, like you can really see how badly he was swollen in his face.
And he also posed the bodies too. That's something that's probably not generally out there, but he posed. Yeah. They're pretty sure he posed the bodies. He put them in positions, unnatural positions. So.
Yeah. And I know the sketch he sent to police. There was one of a naked female, and I'm thinking the sketch was so sexual in nature, and even down to the positioning of the body. And then you could see it by the victim's body, like the actual crime scene photograph. And it almost matches up identically to that. So, but yeah, the details of like the vagina, they were so, like, I mean, you could just tell that the it was very sexual. It was a very sexual sketch, but yeah, he would send this to police. Like he kept doing this. He kept taunting them. And finally one day, this floppy disk, because he asked basically authorities, well, can a floppy be traced back? Is it safe to send? And they're like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, you can send it, it'll be fine. And that's how he got caught. You play stupid games and win stupid prizes, I guess. So he wasn't very bright when it comes to that, unless he was trying to get caught.
Right. I think that's one thing. And yeah, I mean, like to pretend that he, just didn't know what he was doing and he stumbled through that first series of murders. To me, that's ridiculous. He had, he choked the young girl out, and supposedly he thought he was dead and he left her body. But then he came back and found out she wasn't dead. So what did he do? He took her to the basement and hung her up on a pipe. Mm-hmm. That's not somebody that's trying to hurry and, doesn't know how to kill somebody. That's somebody that's, doing that on purpose, intentionally,
No. Yeah. It's like, I think I'm just going to watch this person struggle, and then I'm going to get off. I'm going to masturbate, and then, then I'll get out of here. But
Yeah,
not,
that's what I say. You can't believe anything on this from what this guy says on the surface. You just can't believe it. I mean, it's just he lies because he's trying to present this certain type of persona.
can you imagine the blue lights shined on the crime scenes at his victims' houses? I mean, there's just like, it's got to be,
Yeah, I mean, and
there's because there's no telling how long he stayed there,
his
even
all his
after the
crimes
fact.
were sexual. All his crimes were sexually motivated. I don't care how much he denies being a rapist. Like I said, I think he didn't rape because he couldn't, and now he's playing off that failure to be able to perform as some type of thing that we should, pat him
But
on the back for.
but he could somehow manage to get it up when they died.
Yeah, yeah,
Thing.
yeah.
And
Well, behind him, he would
yeah,
stand behind him apparently, and that was the other thing that made me suspicious of that he had guilt is because he killed all his victims, as far as I can tell from the coroner's reports, from behind. So he didn't want to watch them. He didn't want to look at their face, but you know, like I said, this was all sexually motivated anyway.
right.
He started this stuff in his childhood, not killing, but he would cut pictures out of magazines and then draw ropes and things like that around their necks, and then he would paste it to a 3x5 card and walk around with it in his pocket. So these are, he was obviously obsessed by this S&M type of issue from a young age. And I think it's because he found a book his father had when he was very young. So that's
Yeah,
my call. So
yeah, and I think he would jerk off to that book growing up. What was it called? It was
the
the name
book,
of the book.
yeah, it was called I'm
Yeah, I
sorry,
can't. The Lonely Heart,
Lonely Hearts Killers.
Lonely Hearts Killers. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
It was a book. It was a book his father had it hidden, and Dennis found it. But it's a book that just talks about these two serial killers back in the day. It was a woman who would put like a singles ad in the paper, and the guy that answered it was
mhm,
a killer, and it just turns out that she was into that too, and they started killing people. They started luring women,
right.
robbing them and killing them. So
Yeah. So all these sexual fantasies started, I guess, when Dennis was a child, and then that thing with his mom getting her ring caught in the sofa spring, and
right.
and how like she seemed terrified, I guess, because she was stuck, and she told Dennis to go and get help, and it turned him on. Like he was aroused by her like helplessness.
Yeah,
Um,
that's kind of weird to me. I don't know anybody that would, under any circumstances, normally be aroused by their mom.
no, far
But
seriously.
he was at that point, and that tells me that there was something really,
Yeah.
really messed up about their relationship, probably.
Yeah, and anybody that like if you're having these issues, like, yeah, please seek help. We don't judge. Just go get some mental help. It's okay. So yeah, so he would also like cut women out of magazines, and then he would draw ropes and like gags on the pictures, and then he'd stick them on index cards, and he would
Right,
carry them around.
right.
Not really sure why, he did
That
that.
was a hobby he participated in as a child. At the same time that he would grab cats and hang them and watch
And
them struggle to die. So
yeah, and I guess he got aroused when spanked as a child, which
oh,
leads
that's right.
me
Yeah.
that leads me to believe he was probably in trouble a lot.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you would jump to the conclusion that if he got aroused by that, then maybe he would do things to get spanked on purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I would definitely say that he was probably a very naughty child.
but like
Um,
this guy presents as having this major ego, but if you get to know him a little bit like Mrs. W did or has, then you realize his ego is really fragile. I mean, he's got a huge ego, but I mean, it's just he's so demanding and so controlling because his ego is so fragile.
yeah. So for anybody that's just now joining us, this is BTK killer Dennis Rader, and we were talking about his crimes, his trial. his behaviors, and we're also talking about the correspondence that I have with him. Um, and it's not because I like him. It's just kind of like, I just want to poke the fire. I just want to see what he says. He, like find stuff out. It's kind of like just taking crime, my love of true crime, just taking it to a whole new level. It's kind of like that. But yeah, it's really an interesting case, and let's go to the next video clip.
Well,
The biggest shock I'd ever had. He was, like I said, the nicest guy in the world. I would have probably gave him a key to watch my dog if I had to when I was leaving town.
Rader, a churchgoer here at Christ Lutheran Church in North Wichita, and not just any member of the church, the president of the Congregation Council.
It's consistent with what we had thought all along, was that it was an individual who blended well into the community, was basically invisible to his neighbors and friends and co-workers because he was just an ordinary guy.
Rader, a compliance officer in Park City. Residents knew him as a stickler for detail.
He'd harass you over your grass, being over, 6 inches tall or something like that.
But Rader also handled animal control. You're about to see a KSN interview shot with Dennis Rader on animal attacks in Park City.
We've been tracking it down. The dogs are somewhat territorial as well as vicious, and we've been trying to round them up and corral them as best we can, working with the reporting parties of where the sheep were killed.
Business reference books dating back to the 70s show Dennis Rader as an ADT security technician. Key, since police have often thought BTK gained access to homes as a utility employee. We've also learned another piece of information about Dennis Rader that matches what police have thought all along about the BTK killer. He has a history with Wichita State University. An alumni book shows Rader graduated WSU in the late 70s. Police linked a BTK letter to a school copy machine, and the brother of victim Catherine Bright reports BTK asked him if he'd seen him around campus. The haunting question now for police and an entire city, does this voice
Round them up and corral them as best we can, working
match this one?
Yes, you will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing.
That, of course, a call police say was made by BTK himself. One member of the Christ Lutheran Church tells me he knew Rader for 20 years and never suspected a thing. Apparently, he was not alone. Bob, Anita.
Very nice job there. Again, Jason, some background on this guy. Any more about him that you can tell us perhaps about this Dennis Rader?
Yeah, we have just learned that he, as we mentioned there in the piece, he worked for ADT Security. I've learned that the location of that area, through KSN reporter Ann Meyer, was at 431 North Washington Street. She's getting that information from former employees and co-workers of Dennis Rader. That an interesting location, and I don't want to jump to conclusions, but that 911 call you heard there was placed from an area downtown, really not far from that ADT security location that his former co-workers say that Rader was stationed at.
Okay, so yeah, this for the people that are just joining us, I think Shannon and Dee Murphy, Spencer, and hi Frank. Yeah, so this is Dennis Rader, and he's the BTK killer, and we were just talking about his case. We're going to wrap it up now because we're actually running a little overtime. Yeah, this case was quite complex, actually. So is there anything you'd like to say, Joe, before we show the documentary? We're actually going to watch the documentary and, and I guess the chat will be going. So, we can talk.
Yeah, I just want to say that if anybody's really interested in this case, there's a lot of information out there. Bunch of stuff I'm sure Mrs. W had that we didn't get to, and stuff I had we didn't get to. But do your own research if you really enjoy it. If not, then we'll see you next Tuesday. Who are we doing next Tuesday?
That's what I was going to ask you.
I think one of our audience members last week suggested Jimmy Seville, and I thought maybe that might be an interesting one, but there's others. So, and I like the ones you pick. Is there anyone out there in the audience that has somebody in particular that they would like us to cover? Go ahead and let us know in the chat. especially
Yeah.
during the documentary, and we'll look at them and we'll pick somebody. But what do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, we get a lot of our viewers. We let them choose who we talk about, and it's actually it's fun that way. It's fun for us because sometimes we learn about somebody we didn't know about. We didn't know anything about the case, and so it always keeps it interesting for us too. So yeah, I guess, and I guess the show Q&A holes will be when, Joe? Like, I guess this Saturday, or I'm sorry, Thursday.
Yeah, we have the round table on Thursday evening, and then Saturday night will be the show, and we'll let everybody know who we're going to cover on those shows for next Tuesday.
Okay. Sounds good. And for those of you that joined us, thank you so much for watching. And you can join us next week on Tuesday for, feel free to send an email to Q&A holes if you have any suggestions for the next week. And I guess on Tuesday, it'll be a surprise. Joe, we can talk about it because I have a couple ideas.
Oh, okay. That sounds good. But we'll announce on Thursday and Saturday show who we're going to do on next Tuesday, and hang out and watch the documentary with us. And
Yes.
we'll chat with you while we're here. And if somebody comes up with a really good name, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just like I said, the chat will be going. So if you want to, talk, we can do that too because we like talking. All right, let's play the documentary.
Thank you, Mrs. W.
He was the most heinous serial killer Kansas has ever seen.
He would be driving down the street and he would see a woman and he would look at her and he would say, "You're next."
He called himself BTK, bind them.
He would take his kit in with him, the cord that he would tie them up with. He had plastic bags that he would put over their heads.
Torture them.
My mother begged for her life, yet he showed no remorse.
Kill them.
You will find a homicide at 43 South Pershing, Nancy Fox.
For 3 whole decades, he would taunt the police and press in a perverted game of cat and mouse.
There was nothing else that we could do except, unfortunately, wait for the next victim.
But was BTK born to kill?
In my mind, there was 2 people in that body. One of them was a husband and father, the Boy Scout leader. The other one was an absolute animal.
Broke into the house and waited for her to come home.
This is the statement of a sadistic murderer.
Were you armed with a handgun at that time also?
Yes, I had a handgun.
What happened when you came back?
I actually had 2 handguns.
Finally caught after terrorizing a community for decades, he would describe his methods and motives in chilling detail.
The strangulation wasn't working on her, and I used a knife on her.
Giving an insight into the mind of a psychopath.
If you read much about serial killers, they go through what they call the different phases.
And answering a mystery that had puzzled a city for 30 years. Wichita, Kansas. Once nicknamed Cowtown due to its position on the cattle drives from Texas, and now better known for its heritage as an aviation city. It's a peaceful place in the heart of the Bible Belt that frequently gets bombarded by tornadoes. But in 1974, it was to get hit by a very different kind of storm.
For the people of Wichita, this was absolutely chilling, absolutely startling, because murders like this, they happened in New York or on the West Coast or in Europe, but they didn't happen here in the heartland.
At the time, Richard LaMunyon was a captain in the Wichita Police Department.
It was a well-established neighborhood, extremely low crime rate. Certainly wouldn't think for a second that you would have this kind of murder over here. That's the house right there. It's on Murdoch and Edgemore. This is the actual area, and he went in the back door there. He cut the phone wire and then went in the back door.
Inside the house, detectives would be presented with a scene they would never forget.
We had a mother and a father and 2 children that were killed in a ritual type process.
The Otero family had only recently moved into the peaceful suburban area. An intruder had strangled the father, Joe, and his wife, Julie, then turned his attention to their son.
There was evidence with Joey, who was 9, that he put the bags and whatnot over Joey's head to suffocate slowly, and that he drew up a chair to sit and watch. When he finally realized he had, the parents and the boy dead, he takes Josephine, the 11-year-old girl, down to the basement and hangs her.
The slaying of the Otero family would be just the first in a series of murders that would last decades and wouldn't be fully explained until the perpetrator finally spoke out 30 years later.
Is this something you were doing for your personal pleasure?
Sexual fantasy, sir.
Dennis Rader was born in 1945 in Pittsburgh in Kansas, but spent most of his childhood in Wichita in Kansas. He was the eldest of 4 boys and had a pretty unremarkable childhood.
Roger Farthing started school on the very same day as Dennis Rader and grew up alongside him. In the small community on the outskirts of Wichita, Rader had a seemingly untroubled childhood.
His mother worked at a grocery store. His dad worked at the railroad and for a number of years. Very, very nice people. Dennis was very laid back, very quiet. We lived close to the river. We spent a lot of time on the river, either fishing or hunting and this kind of thing. And that was the kind of thing he was into more than the sports and athletics and this kind of thing. He was never outstanding in anything. He never came to the forefront in any way, but he always participated. He was always there. He was part of the group.
Although Rader seemed to fit in with his friends, albeit on the fringes, dark and alarming feelings and thoughts were developing in his young mind.
When he was growing up, one of the things that he mentioned was that he had a very distinct recollection of his grandmother killing chickens, and that he became thrilled with that type of activity.
A lot of us hung out down at the river and this kind of thing, and trapped and fished and that kind of thing. A couple of my classmates who were probably with him a lot more than I was away from school, a couple of them have indicated to me that they saw at a young age that he would go after like turtles and this kind of stuff, and as opposed to maybe killing them the way a lot of us would have if it was a snapping turtle or something like that. They said that he would hang them. Well, I never saw that. I didn't hear about that till after he had been convicted.
He would subsequently reveal he enjoyed torturing animals and that he had a fetish for women's underwear. Neither of those behaviors were apparent at the time, but both those behaviors would be relevant in relation to the serial killer that Dennis Rader would become.
One event in particular would prove to be a potentially pivotal moment in shaping Rader's sexual deviancy.